As the winter of 1944 gave way to a tentative spring in 1945, the European continent found itself in the final, convulsive stages of a great conflict. The World War, a cataclysm that had reshaped the very fabric of human existence for 6 long years, was drawing to its inevitable conclusion. On a map, the situation appeared stark and simple. Great armies, like immense geological forces, were converging on the heart of Germany. From the east, the vast formations of the Soviet Red Army advanced relentlessly. From the west, the American forces pushed forward. The British forces pushed forward. Other Allied forces pushed forward. The lines on the map were not merely abstract representations. They were living, breathing entities composed of millions of individuals, each with their own story, their own fears, and their own hopes for survival. To understand this moment, we must look at the map not as a static document, but as a dynamic portrait of a world in profound transition. Maps are tools of navigation, but they are also chronicles of power. By April of 1945, the Eastern Front was a scene of immense momentum. The Soviet Red Army stood poised on the banks of the Oder River, a mere 60 kilometers from Berlin. Their advance was not a simple line, but a sprawling, multi-pronged assault. Marshal Zhukov, Marshal Konev, millions of Soviet soldiers, thousands of Soviet tanks, a terrifying arsenal of artillery. Their primary objective was clear and symbolic: capture the capital of the Reich, raise the red flag over the Reichstag. For the Soviets, it was an act of retribution for the suffering inflicted on their homeland. The scale of their force was almost geological, a human tide preparing to wash over the final defenses. From the west, Allied armies made a dramatic push into Germany. In the final weeks of the war, Berlin was no longer a city in any recognizable sense. It was a landscape of ruins, a vast, sprawling necropolis haunted by the living. For years, Allied bombing raids had systematically dismantled its infrastructure, but the Soviet assault that began on April 16th brought a new level of destruction. An unending barrage of artillery shells, fired from thousands of guns arrayed outside the city, fell like a steel rain. The sound was a constant, deafening roar that became the very atmosphere of the city, a physical presence that shook the ground and shattered the nerves. Daily life, as it had once been known, had ceased to exist. The population of over 2 million people had been driven underground. The city's extensive network of cellars, U-Bahn tunnels, and purpose-built air raid shelters became a subterranean world. Here, in the damp, crowded darkness, families huddled together, listening to the cacophony above. Life was reduced to its most basic elements: the search for water, the desperate hunt for a few potatoes or a piece of bread, and the constant gnawing fear. In these underground communities, strangers shared what little they had, as above ground the city was a battlefield, street by street, house by house. Section 4. Below the rubble, the Führer bunker. Deep beneath the gardens of the Reich Chancellery, insulated from the apocalyptic destruction above, lay the Führer bunker. Diagram of the Führer bunker layout. This was not a single room, but a complex of concrete shelters, the final headquarters and residence of Adolf Hitler. Stark, functional, claustrophobic whirled away from the imperial grandeur he once envisioned for Berlin. Here, in a series of small, low-ceilinged rooms, the final act played out. The air was stale, recycled by a ventilation system. The faint hum of diesel generators, the bunker's artificial heartbeat. Life here was a strange mixture of routine and hysteria. In this subterranean court, Hitler presided over daily military conferences that grew more detached from reality with each passing day. Section 5. The Human River, Mass Displacement, and the Refugees' Path. While armies clashed, leaders hid in bunkers. Another equally dramatic movement was taking place across Central and Eastern Europe. This was the movement of people. Millions of civilians, primarily Germans, fled westward, away from the advancing Red Army. one of the largest migrations in human history, a vast, chaotic river of humanity, driven by a primal fear, fueled by stories, some true, some exaggerated by propaganda. For these people, the map meant a road west, a bridge still standing, a town for shelter. The journey was unimaginable hardship. People fled with what they could carry, carts, bicycles, or on foot. Long, straggling columns clogged the roads, sharing paths with retreating German units. Winter 1945 was brutally cold. Many, the very young and the very old, succumbed to exhaustion, hunger, freezing temperatures. They were vulnerable to air attack. Allied and Soviet aircraft strafed the columns, often mistaking them for military convoys. Sunrise brought hope. Sunset brought the fear of a night in a frozen field or a burned-out barn. Section 6. The day the guns fell silent. The formal end of the war in Europe came in stages during the first week of May 1945. Following Hitler's death, his successor, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, orchestrated a series of surrenders. The goal was to surrender as many German troops as possible to the Western Allies. On May 2nd, the battered defenders of Berlin finally capitulated to the Soviets. On May 7th, at General Eisenhower's headquarters in Reims, France, German General Alfred Jodl signed the instrument of unconditional surrender. The order was given for all fighting to cease on all fronts at 11:01 Central European Time on May 8th. After nearly 6 years of unimaginable violence, the guns in Europe were to fall silent. For many on the front lines, the moment arrived with a strange, unnerving quiet. Some cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. Many simply slept. On a map, the red and blue lines ceased their movement. The arrows of advance were replaced by the stillness of an armistice. In London, Paris, and New York, massive crowds flooded the streets, dancing, singing, and weeping with relief. Section 7. A new map for a new world. The end of the war in 1945 did not simply restore the old map, it drew a new one. In conference rooms at Yalta and Potsdam, the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain made decisions that reshaped the continent. Borders were redrawn with a pen. Poland shifted westward, losing land to the Soviet Union in the east and gaining former German lands in the west. Germany was carved into 4 occupation zones. Berlin sat like an island inside the Soviet zone. These lines had profound human consequences. A town long German could become Polish. A family from eastern Poland found themselves citizens of the Soviet Union. The most dramatic division separated Soviet East from Western West. Churchill later called it the Iron Curtain. Yet the map also told a story of rebuilding and hope, a blueprint for recovery, engineers restoring bridges and railways. Aid organizations, including the newly formed United Nations, used it to direct food and medical aid. The lines that once guided bombers now guided humanitarian convoys. Slowly, life returned to ruined landscapes. The maps of 1945 are documents of both an end and a beginning. Maps are not just paper and ink. They reflect power, conflict, and aspiration. They show paths of destruction and the first tentative paths toward a fragile peace.